Morning, everyone. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session on storytelling. Just a quick background myself. I've been in your shoes before. I was a principal, I was a superintendent, classroom teacher, all that. I retired out of Illinois public education in 2019, and then came over to Eastern Kentucky University as an assistant professor, where I am thoroughly enjoying my new career in still related in education and public education, but at a different level, and I'm loving it. This session on storytelling, I think it's a hot topic right now, and it's also one of the most important skills that you will learn as an administrator. This will help you in your personal career, personal life, as well as your professional life as well. Anytime, just for example, anytime you're giving a speech, you tell stories. That's the key to telling a dynamic speech that people remember. And that's the point of what you want to do when you're telling a speech, is you want people to remember what you just said. Telling stories is the vehicle to accomplish that. Also, anytime, and I always say, there's a personal interest too. If you're interviewing for a job, anytime someone asks, tell us a time when. Give us an example of. They're asking for a story. And I always like to start off with the story that I always share of my student teaching experience. This was way back in the early 80s, like 1980, 81, 82, around that time, like I said, 1982. And I was a senior at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And I was doing my student teaching at an elementary school in Boulder, Colorado. It was outside of the city limits in the county, very rural, dusty area. And my supervising teacher was Monty Whiteley. And Monty was probably in his 70s, still teaching 6th grade. And most of his students were all legacy students. They were children of former students. The administration hated him. They wanted him. They tried to get him to retire. His response was, "We'll take more vitamins," because he just wanted to stick it to him and continue teaching in his way and his method. Monty was an interesting character. He, being in his 70s, he always wore the same beige windbreaker jacket, regardless of the season, regardless of the weather. He always had that same beige jacket. And I think it may have been really for the purpose of having pockets in which to keep his cigarettes, which were Virginia Slims at the time, as his stash. He lived about a half a mile from the school, and he always drove this 1959 Ford Edsel. It was this bleached out red kind of color, kind of a rusty color from decades of exposure to the Colorado weather. But Monty had a lot of confidence in me, because the day I walked in to do student teaching, he walked out and he said, "Ray, if you need anything, I'll be in the lounge." And back in 1982, that would have been the Smokers Lounge. Well, I jumped in. I took advantage of this. I love the opportunity. This was, my classroom now. And we, like all student teachers, we are going to change the world. We're going to revolutionize education in that 8-week period. Well, I'm teaching like crazy all week. Monty's coming in and out of the classroom, doing school store stuff, maybe picking up some more cigarettes, some more Virginia Slims out of his desk. He was just doing things that didn't seem to me to be really observant. They were just casual interactions, in and out, in and out, in and out. So by the end of the week, revolutionizing education takes a lot out of you. And so after that first week, I slept so well that Friday night. Saturday morning, my phone rings at 6 a.m. and it's Monty. And I said, "Monty, is everything okay?" He said, "Yeah, it's fine." He said, "But I was just wondering about a couple of things. Am I disturbing you?" He said, well, no, Monty, it's 6 a.m. on Saturday. I'm really not doing anything else. He said, well, I've got a question for you. I said, okay. He said, Ray, do you remember on Monday? I know it was the first day of the week and of your student teaching, and there was a lot going on, but do you remember Jason came up and asked you a question? I said, no, I don't remember at all. He said, well, Jason had asked you how your weekend was. I go, okay, I guess I kind of remember that. Then there was silence. You jackass. I said, Monty, where did that come from? What's wrong? He says, don't you realize what was going on there? He didn't care about your weekend. He maybe just wanted a little male attention. Don't you know his parents are going through a divorce, father's already living in Detroit, and maybe, just maybe, he didn't want to be brushed off with weekend was fine. Maybe it was that interaction, that male attention that he wanted. Well, Monty went on for the next 3 hours, giving me some of the most insightful, brilliant feedback on my teaching, just from those happenstance, chance interactions, observations that he saw when he would come into the classroom. Then after 3 hours, he took a breath and he said, Ray, I am out of beer. Because Monty had been drinking since 6 a.m. when he dialed my phone number the first time. He said, would you mind going to North Boulder Liquors and picking me up a case of Schlitz Tall Boys? I said, okay, I guess this was the student teaching experience. So I got dressed, drove to the liquor store, got the beer, well, the Schlitz Tall Boys, and took it to him. And then we drank beer for the rest of the day and solved all the problems of education. Now, from that story here, if you could just unmute yourself, because I can only see the side panel because I'm sharing the screen, of course. What lessons did that communicate? What did that communicate? What did that story communicate to you, who you just met me now? What do you know about me? What do you know about my values? What do you know about me that's important, that goes back to those student teaching days? Here's where you can open up your mic and just, what did that story relate to you?
It's sometimes it's the small things, but also the way that you described him as a teacher. You would have thought that, he wasn't a very good teacher at the beginning, where he just let you stay there and he went to smoke. But come to find out, he had a relationship with his kids that was probably, really, really good. And he probably was a good teacher, it just in his own way. And that, I think that's always important.
Yeah. And Travis, I'm sorry for interrupting, but and you said, because you said a word in there, one of those words. So what did I learn that became a very important value to me as a teacher?
Was it relationships?
Absolutely. Monty was trying to teach me, without hitting me over the head with it, that every interaction with a child is an opportunity to extend and deepen the relationship with that child. And that a quick, how was your weekend? If I miss that, if I blow that, that is a missed opportunity forever. And so rather than saying every interaction is an opportunity to deepen and extend the relationship, Monty taught me through that story that, in the background of that child, that those relationships are important. And this is how we develop those relationships. These are our opportunities to develop these relationships through these interactions, and not letting these interactions, these opportunities, get by us. So thank you, Travis. So yeah, that's an amazing lesson. let's get, let me start going through the slides, and then we're going to have a little chance, because the nice thing is we do have an hour. The bad, well, I mean, the downside is it's virtual, and so we aren't going to be able to pair up and all that stuff, but we'll work through this. It's not going to be a problem at all. So why do we use stories? Jenny Riddle is a Chicago area storyteller. Stories engage, inspire, and change our lives. There's actually a lot of science to storytelling in terms of what happens in our minds and the images that develop in our minds when we hear a story, and that's what makes stories stick in our head. Simon Sinek, who's the famous business consultant, says stories are attempts to share our values and beliefs. Storytelling is worthwhile and when it tells what we stand for. And that's what leadership's all about. So you see, when, well, like I said, I gave the example of when we're in an interview and we're asked, you know, what's important, or give us an example of, tell us a time when. These stories are really opportunities to communicate our values and beliefs. Don't tell me about it, show me. This is how you show what you stand for. That's why these are so important. So everyone's got a story. And here's the first thing. Here's the first thing with stories. Everyone's got a story. No one can say, oh, I don't have any stories. I don't have anything to tell. I don't have anything interesting. Well, guess what? Whoops. Guess what? Everyone's got a story, and your story is important. And your story is valuable because it's your story. And actually, and here's a little dirty little secret. You get one well-crafted story, it can have multiple layers, multiple lessons, multiple applications. You don't have to have a million stories for every kind of situation you might encounter. But I'm telling you, if you've got 3 to 5 good stories, and in the course of our career, I mean, you've got 3 to 5 stories just from today already. You can bend those, you can massage those. They can be applied to a variety of different situations and learnings. Because let's go back to my Monty story. We talked about the lesson being relationship building with students. But what's another lesson or example that could have been illustrated from my Monty story? And just go ahead and unmute yourself and chime in. You know, what's another situation I could have used that story in besides relationship building? I can wait this out. What else did that story illustrate? Was an example of?
I'm going to jump in and share. I think that there's an interesting piece to Monty, the educator too, who is drinking at 6 a.m. on a Saturday. It evokes some concerns about emotional well-being and wellness for teachers too, but just the reflection kind of journey that he led you on. And again, kind of modeling for you, not just telling you something, but forcing you to, did this student ask you this question? And now you have to think, okay, yeah, they did, and unpack that and kind of story tell to yourself. And so just that aspect of self-reflection and how like telling yourself as what happened, you know, there's something interesting kind of going on there.
Yeah, absolutely, Erin. Thank you. Certainly, you know, how we race through our days without being particularly reflective. There, I mean, and I think it was in the 80s, there was the book, The Reflective Practitioner, which I haven't thought about in years. But that's another good example of the practice of reflecting on our experiences and our lived experiences. And that's, you're absolutely right, Erin, to see, because also everyone has their own interpretation of the story that I told. What I was thinking, which they're all right answers, but I'm a 21-year-old kid. Who am I learning from? How old did I say Monty was? Anybody remember? 70s. He was up there. If I was doing a presentation on mentorship, that could have been a story I could have told about how I learned from this mentor as well. So the point is, handful of good stories will serve you in many, 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 many areas. So let's talk about what makes a good story. I am not an English teacher, so I am not that hung up on the technical characteristics or the technical elements of a story, but good stories involve settings and characters. There's a problem, there's some confrontation, there's some obstacle, there's a rising action, there's a climax where it all comes to a head, and then there's this falling action or the denouement. There's emotion and conflict oftentimes, and a resolution to that. That's kind of the typical standard story structure. And as I said, I'm not the English teacher, I'm the storyteller. And so what concerns me more than having the technical elements in a story is what I've highlighted. What's the message? Is the message clear through your story? It has to pass the who cares test. Is it something that anyone cares about? And so what? Now that you've told the story, there's a lesson. So what? Is there a point to it? So that's what I look for when I'm telling a story. I want to make sure that it matters to somebody, that it's meaningful. But there's always kind of there's kind of a rising point and then a resolution to these. So let's talk about some of the elements of a good story. And let me just check. Okay, I'm just going back and forth between the chat room. Elements of good stories, they're honest. Now, one of the things I didn't say, just because I overlooked it, was when I'm talking about stories, I am talking about true personal stories. These are your true personal stories. These are not fairy tales. They're not once upon a time, which is a teaching tool. I mean, I've got a colleague at the university who does use fairy tales and fables to teach, but that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about your own true personal stories. They are honest, they're personal, they're revealing. When you tell a story about how great you are, well, okay, maybe you're making a point. But when you tell a story about when you messed up, that makes you human. And when we do that, when we reveal our vulnerabilities, it makes us more human. And since everyone has bad days, everyone has failures, it makes us relatable. And I'll tell you, you tell a story, someone's going to find some aspect of that story that they can relate to. Maybe in my Monty story, maybe they had a mentor that they had worked with. Maybe that it takes you back to your student teaching days. Maybe Aaron pointed out the issue of drinking at 6 a.m. Yeah, there were some issues there. Yeah. But it reveals our vulnerability and our humanness in these stories. They illustrate your point. They're memorable. It tells what's important to you, and it tells what you value. Good stories connect us, you and me, together. They relate, make us relatable. They illustrate a point. Again, that's the objective of storytelling, is not just to do a reveal, to show our vulnerability and our humanness, but to demonstrate, to teach a lesson out of that story, or to demonstrate it. So your unique story, think about this for yourselves. What's important to me, to you? What do I value? What am I willing to share, to be vulnerable about? I've heard stories where people have revealed some of the most amazing things in public storytelling events. I come from Chicago, where you could probably attend a public storytelling event at least every week, and probably multiple times every week in different places. And I've heard, people reveal things that have just been amazing in terms of some of the early obstacles that they faced in their lives. I've started a storytelling event in Madison County, right in Richmond at the Apollo's Pizza, which I'll promote later. But I've heard students talk about their suicide attempts. I've heard students talk about growing up with dads in prison, and moms got substance abuse issues of being raised by grandma. And I mean, just such honesty. And when I slot in, particularly the students, for the storytelling events, I don't know what their story is going to be about. So I'm hearing it for the first time as the audience, and it is absolutely amazing what people are willing to be open about. And those are some of the best stories. And it doesn't only help the storyteller, you, in being honest and authentic about your life, but it also helps the audience, the listener, the receiver of the story, can see that, you survived this. Maybe we've got the experience in common. You survived it, I can survive it too. I can hang in there. So it really, how your stories not only illustrate your points, it helps people. It helps people. So questions to ask when you look at a story that you have told. Did I connect with the audience? Can the audience relate to me in my situation? Am I honest? That's the real key to a good story. Remember all the technical elements? If you're just honest, that's what I think is the most important. And then, did it humanize me? Did I reveal something about myself? Did I share my vulnerability? Did my story illustrate my point? Did I share what I value? What's important to me? Did I take a risk? Storytelling is tough to do. And I told a story at the beginning about Monty that wasn't very personal. That wasn't very intimate. It was on a professional level. And that was what is appropriate for here. I've been in other storytelling events where I've shared literally life-changing events in my life and been very vulnerable and talked about some of my mess ups. It's okay to take the risk. The audience appreciates it when you take the risk, because it's that mutual respect that you have for them and they have for you. So let's think about this. Now, the reason I've asked for the hour is to actually do some practicing, because it's one thing to this is a topic where just hearing about it doesn't really sink in, doesn't make it meaningful. What is meaningful is the practice. And I hope we won't it looks like we've got 15 participants, so 14 of you minus myself. Not gonna be able to break up, but just think for a minute, each of you, what was your motivation for being a principal? And I'm assuming everyone's a principal. If you're not a principal, what was your motivation for getting into the job that you currently hold, whatever it is? So just think about that for a minute. And then I'll ask for a couple volunteers so we can get some practice hearing some stories and then developing those stories among friends. So just think for a minute. All right, so recognizing that this has not been a drafted out story, it's not been written, it's not been planned beyond the thought that you may have given it right now. Who would like to share a story about what motivated you to become a principal or whatever job you hold right now? Again, I can't see everyone, so just unmute yourself. You're among friends, and we would just love to hear your story.
I'll start with mine, if that's okay.
Sure. Who is this? Because I can't, like I said, I can't see all.
Gregory Lawson.
Gregory.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Gregory. Let's hear your story.
Well,
roughly 3 minutes. Okay.
Well, yeah, it'll be far less than that. But
No problem. No problem.
I would start the story off by saying I got into administration because I like the ability to not have to pee on a certain schedule, so I can take restroom breaks when I need to. But I was as a teacher. I worked with several really strong assistant principals and a principal, and they encouraged me to pursue the path. In my second year as a teacher, my observing administrator told me that I should start pursuing this kind of path. And I thought, I don't want to do that. I'm doing other things. I'm coaching basketball. I'm sponsoring clubs. I don't want to spend my time doing that when I have a little bit of free time. But he continued to encourage me, and actually through the K-TIP mentorship program, I was able to pay for all of my classes at Eastern to get my instructional leadership master's. So briefly, that would be my story. But like I said, the main motivation is being able to go to the bathroom when I want.
Now, that's brilliant. That's a brilliant story, Gregory. Thank you for sharing. Where are you from?
I am currently the associate principal at Carroll County High School.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think I said earlier on, one of the things about stories is people who hear that story are able to relate to you. Did anyone else in the room find something in Gregory's story that they immediately related to, that it jogged a memory, that it made you think about something? Again, unmute yourself and just chime in about if you were able to relate to something he said.
I'll go if nobody else wants to. This is Michael Elmore.
Yeah, just you're going to relate it to Gregory's story, right?
He jogged the memory. I don't know about the bathroom break thing, but it makes sense now. But I was teaching and coaching, and that kind of what he said that jogged my memory. I wasn't 100% sure I wanted to be an administrator, but you have to get your master's in something. So I thought I'd get it in something that I could maybe use one day. So did that in my principalship. And then, like I said, I was happy coaching and teaching, and actually turned out a friend of mine who went through the program with me ended up calling me later and saying, "Hey, I got a principal's job up here. I need an assistant principal I can trust. Come up and do this job with me." And that's kind of how I got into it. And I've loved it ever since, and been an administrator for 15 years now. So yeah, that's kind of my short version of my story.
Yeah, fantastic. Anyone else have a memory get jogged from Gregory's story? Okay, I'll go. Gregory, you jogged a memory immediately. Now I'm going to share my memory with you, and I'm going to do it very strategically I'm going to tell you what I remembered from your story, how I related to your story. And then Gregory, tell me how mine was different than yours. Not better, different, okay? When I heard your story, it immediately reminded me of the time after school. I was probably in my second year of teaching. I was walking out of the school, probably 5, 6 o'clock at night. I never got there early in the morning, got there late and would stay late. And I'm walking out of the school with the principal, Mike Lyon. And I remember it was a particularly difficult time. We had some really rough kids and families who were really struggling on a number of levels. And that kind of manifested themselves at school. And I was probably frustrated and down, but as we were walking out to our cars, Mike Lyon, the principal, turned to me and he said, "Ray, you've got a future in education." And ever since then, there have been times I'm 62 now and I've been at it this long. There have been times I've cursed him from that day. There are times I've hated him for telling me that. But overall, it was the push and the motivation that got me to pursue, higher levels of education, to become a principal, to become a superintendent, and now a professor, and all that. Gregory, in what ways, what techniques did I use that were just slightly different than yours?
Well, you used, I talked about how over multiple interactions that somebody that was inspiring me got me to go down this path, whereas you are recounting a singular event where you were walking through a parking lot that led you down your path.
That's right. One of the things that I want you to think about in terms of developing your own stories, all of you, is we tend to generalize. We tend to be very broad and just, kind of broad sweeps, broad strokes in terms of telling a story. And the best stories are very narrowly focused. Most of us don't have the examples of the time I picked the car up off the child and saved the child's life. We don't need those kinds of earth-shaking major stories. You could tell a story about opening up your box of cereal and making breakfast for your kids in the morning. They can be very narrow, specific. Specificity is a key because it brings out greater detail. And those details are the hooks that we have that help us remember elements of the story. I specifically used his name, Mike Lyon, and that helps personalize it too. Instead of a principal or the principal, it was actually Mike Lyon who was the principal. When I talked about my Monty story, I used him by name. I didn't say my supervising teacher. I said Monty Whiteley, who was my supervising teacher. So be very specific and narrow, because you can go deeper into the story that way and develop it in greater depth and detail. Thank you, Gregory. Let's have one more. Another story about what motivated you for becoming a principal or the job that you hold now. As I said, I can wait you out. Why did you get into this crazy business that we're in?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in. And just to be honest, some of the stories that have been told already kind of hit home with me.
Sure. Now, I'm sorry, who is this?
Jason Arnett, the assistant
Jason.
principal at Godolphin County High School.
Okay. Jason, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Jason. Go ahead.
Just when you get out of education with your bachelor's, it's just known that you're going to go on and get your master's. So I got mine in educational leadership. Then 30s, got married, decided to start a little family. And that's when I started looking to move up. It was a monetary reason. I had to provide for my family, so I had to move up.
And then how did you do that?
Well, I completed my master's degree, became pretty good friends, hung around people in those positions, learned how they kind of do things, how they carry themselves, and mimicked. Greatest form of flattery is mimicry. So I mimicked kind of how they held themselves, how they handled situations, went through some things, and then fell in with a good group of mentors and followed them. And here I am today, first year assistant principal, 12 years into my career, still got a long time to go.
What a great time to jump into administration during a pandemic, huh, Jason?
Exactly. I think my second week of being hired was the week we brought students back.
Yeah, that's great. You triggered a memory for me, but before I share what how I related to your story, who else had heard anything that you could relate to from Jason's story?
So I think mine's a combination. Sorry, this is Tiffany Clark. from New Haven School in Nelson County.
Hi, Tiffany, thanks.
You're welcome. So mine would be kind of a culmination, I guess, of a couple of different people as what jogged kind of what brought me here. I've been in lots of roles within education in my short amount of time. To be honest, I think early on, an administrator reached out to me and just said, I feel like you have some of the leadership skills. I can anticipate you seeing you in a leadership role in the future. I always said, oh, absolutely not, never. That won't ever be me. I also learned very quickly not to ever say never, because those things always come back to haunt you. So from there, it was kind of one of the things that opportunities arose within our district. I was pushed from people that believed in me to really look at education a little bit differently. I stepped into an assistant principal position. At that point, I was actually in the building that I'm currently in as an assistant principal. Another opportunity opened up at central office. I felt like I at least had some of the skills, but also I had a passion for students with disabilities. I wanted to provide opportunities for kids. I wanted to push them, but then also see them transition into our community. So I became director of special education at that point. I did stay in that role for 3 years. Really looking at education in a broader spectrum, I think, was kind of the reason that I chose to go to central office, to impact multiple schools. Again, 11 schools in Nelson County, really working with teachers to look at what opportunities we gave students with disabilities. From there, I realized really quickly I was way too far away from kids. I really thrive with the interaction from students, seeing them grow. So I actually came back to a building during a pandemic. So I am a pandemic principal. I am year 2 as a pandemic principal, and have learned a whole lot about myself, but also about our community and really what our kids need as school is changing rather quickly. I kind of like the challenge. I want to see our kids thrive. So that is also why I became principal, to be able to see that for myself, create a vision and a culture that really benefits my local community.
Thank you, Tiffany. That was brilliant, just beautiful. And you see then how when we hear a story, they tend to lead to, lead to other stories, our own stories. Tiffany, I'm going to ask you a favor. May I put you on the spot, Tiffany?
I'm sure it won't be the first time. Absolutely.
As a pandemic principal, what could be tougher than that, right? You made a reference to, you learned a lot of things about yourself. Can you then mute yourself? And I'm going to come back to you in a few minutes. Could you tell us a story about one of those things that you learned about yourself from those mentors or those experiences that you were referring to? Is that okay?
Yeah, unless you just want me to go, because one thing specifically comes to mind.
No, just hold on to it for a minute, because I don't want to
Okay.
get off Jason's story completely before we veer off to yours, but I want to capture yours, kind of a self-standing one, okay? So thank you, Tiffany. I'll come back to you. You can have a few minutes to think. Excuse me. Jason, the thing that triggered my memory is, you said you had the family, you're growing a family, and you got into administration for monetary reasons. And I've always said that we hear about people don't go into teaching for the money. Well, guess what? I did. I clearly did. I had a mentor who was a superintendent, and besides the diversity of your days, the activities, the areas that you're involved in, that's where the money is. And so I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't want to be a 6th grade teacher, but I had to get my principal certificate. I didn't really want to be a principal, but you had to get your superintendent certificate. And then I was a superintendent for 17 years. But I related immediately to Jason's story when I heard the monetary motivations. So that was the hook for me. So let's focus in on Gregory's story, Jason's story, and then the story that we will hear from Tiffany. So Tiffany's story is going to have the benefit of this background. Gregory and Jason, I will like to put you on the spot too. Go back to this very same story you told us. and now just have it narrowly focused. Talk about the details. Make it vivid. Think of the five senses, because those are the things that we relate to. Color, time of the year, the temperature, visuals, who was there, what did they look like, any unusual characteristics, what did they say, smells. What are those things that can add depth to the story and richness to the story? I'll give you a few seconds to just think about it, and then we'll just go Gregory, Jason, and Tiffany. And so again, same story, but just a little bit refined, adding the details, adding depth and richness and vibe to make those really vibrant and memorable. Now, Gregory, I already remember vividly that you like to pee when you want to pee. That part I remember. But would you mind retelling the rest of your story? Just adding some more detail to it.
Absolutely. So when I'll start off by saying again that the main motivation was the ability to go to the restroom whenever I need to and not being on a schedule. But when I was a young teacher at Shelby County High School, I was mentored by several significant administrators to me. Our principal was Gary Kidwell, who I'd known for many years and was a great leader for our building. And one of his assistants, Don Harding, was my observing administrator, and he was my observing administrator over a course of several years. And in my second year in my post-observation conference, my summative, he started encouraging me to pursue an administration degree. And I was an assistant basketball coach there, and I was the sponsor of the very popular ping pong club that there at the high school. And I didn't want to take up any more of my free time by taking classes or anything like that. But over the course of a couple of years in all of our formal settings, he would always encourage me. And eventually I became a K-TIP mentor teacher there at the high school, and through his guidance as well. And eventually that was what I used to pay for my instructional supervision masters there at EKU, was those K-TIP mentor hours. But Mr. Harding was the one that pushed me to and encouraged me to go into this field of administration.
Thank you, Gregory. For the rest of you, what stands out, or was there something new that you were that you related to from Gregory's revised story? Or what were some of the elements that made it more memorable, more interesting?
I think you went into more detail in regards to the relationship and how that actually impacted him. Even some, thinking back to the conversations, the specific people that impacted him in that journey.
Yeah, he mentioned them by name, in fact, and the location too. I don't remember if you said Shelby County High School in your first version of the story, Gregory. I don't remember that, but I did pick up on it this time. The other thing that I connected with was that you talked about your summative evaluation. And I still remember one of my first evaluations as a teacher was that I was marked down on my bulletin boards. And my bulletin boards have never improved from that time. But that was something that I was able to relate to. It was a hook in the story that brought me in. And as the storyteller, you never know what the hook is going to be. So just adding great detail, a lot of specifics, and narrowly focused, and people will find a hook somewhere along the way. But like I say, you just don't know where it's going to be. So, and Gregory, how did that feel as the storyteller going into greater detail like that? You're muted, Greg. There you go.
It felt like I was just like a student when you're trying to elicit more detail in an essay or anything else. You're just trying to get them to give a full picture or a full defense of what their point is or what their opinion is. And while you were talking, I was thinking about more detail I could have added, because I can still see myself sitting in Mr. Harding's office and him wearing a plaid shirt and the sun reflecting through the window when he's talking to me about doing these things, and in my mind saying, yes, sir, but thinking, man, he's crazy. Why would I do this?
That's right. That's right. And when you come into, whenever any of us come into an evaluations, is it the most comfortable feeling in the world? No, we're uncomfortable in an evaluation because we don't know is it going to be good or bad. We remember the bad stuff. We kind of forget we'll gloss over the good stuff that we hear. But those would be details that paint a picture. And Greg, something you just said that really resonated with me, and I'm going to steal it from you. I'll tell you that right now. Think of the story as a picture or a jigsaw puzzle with an image on it. And all the detail, and then turn it over so that the puzzle is empty. And one by one, you're putting the puzzle pieces in. Each of those puzzle pieces is a detail. It's some aspect of the story that you're being very specific about. And as we have more details, what happens in those puzzle pieces, we have more puzzle pieces getting fitted in, the image emerges. It's the same thing with our stories. The more details that we give, the image suddenly emerges in front of us. And so think of it that way. Each of those details is a puzzle piece. And the more puzzle pieces, you can make out the image better, and you'll remember that image better. Great. Thank you, Gregory. Jason, let's hear about your revised story with just a few more details.
All right. I guess mine kind of begins in college. I went to a small private college in Eastern Kentucky, Alice Lloyd College. Went for a pre-pharmacy degree, went 3 years pre-pharmacy, got all the prereqs done, and got tired of school. So I went to my advisor and I said, I want out in 4. I said, I want to be able to go to work after those 4. He said, well, it might take you 5, but you could be a teacher. You can go get your education classes. You've got all the science background, be a science high school teacher. I said, okay, that makes sense. I'm tired of school, so why not go work in the school? So I did it. I did it. I got my education degree, graduated, come back to the high school that I graduated from, and was very content, happy. Money was good, living by myself, single, fishing, hunting, playing basketball, just enjoying my 20s. And I can remember sitting at break, afternoon snack, overseeing the students, supervising, and our assistant principal, who's now our superintendent, Chris Meadows, comes up to me and says, have you ever thought about administration? And I said, well, and this is 4 years after completing my bachelor's and getting into education. I said, well, I have my master's degree because it was recommended to me early in my career to go ahead and get my master's degree because of the increase in pay. And I said, I got it in educational leadership, but I haven't taken the test. And I remember him saying, well, just keep it in mind. And he walked off. And about 6 years later, he's now principal. He comes back to me and says, how are you still thinking about administration? And at this point, I had gotten married. We had had our first child. And I had went through and got my rank 1 to compensate financially for the first child. And my wife staying at home with that child. It is very difficult to raise a family on $54,000, which was what my salary was at that time. And then me and my wife were in talks of having a second child. You know, we didn't want the first child to be lonely and all this stuff that, you know, young married couples have conversations. And I told her, I said, I'll go get my rank 1, finish it up. I said, that'll help pay for the compensation. I said, I'll get a little raise. And I said, by having the second child, I have to leave the classroom. There's no option. I have to get out of the classroom. And I gave myself a year to do it. And luckily, I did it. And I was able to do it in my home district where I graduated high school from, where I taught biology at for 11 years. And I consider myself extremely lucky that everything worked out the way it did.
Thanks, Jason. Again, some fantastic descriptions and depth as you expanded that story. For the rest of you, what did we learn about Jason through some of these greater details? What do we know about him that I don't think we realized or knew from the first version?
I think he went into more detail about his family, and it made more of a personal connection. He spoke of the family earlier, but with the details, it gave you just a little bit more. You almost felt like you could picture it a little better, and you could understand his feeling of his family and the importance of what they had to do.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, who is this?
Melissa Turner.
Okay, Melissa, thank you. Melissa, I mean, could you kind of picture yourself sitting at the dining room table as the extra person as they had those conversations?
Yeah, like the fly on the wall. And you really felt like you were there being a part of that decision-making process with him, as opposed to, well, that's what he did.
Yeah. Now, I'm not a young married person anymore. I'm an old married person. But for everyone who's married, you've probably had those conversations. And so when Jason made the reference to conversations that young married couples have, it's like that I mean, that's brilliant, because it's something we can all relate to if you're in a relationship, let's say. And the kind of conversations and the challenges that we've all faced. Relatable. There was another kind of, I guess it's a value that I picked up on Jason. Did anyone else pick up on a pattern of things that he had said in the second version that tells us something about him?
I appreciated, this is Erin, the room host. Hello, everyone. But I appreciated the details about hunting and fishing and being single, and then the shift to the prioritization of children and family. And I just, again, relatable, very human, and just kind of just so relatable in that transition of being very kind of selfish with time and able to prioritize your own interests, and then how that kind of just had to shift. Really,
yeah, thanks, Erin. I didn't even think about that because my perspective is I've been married for 32 years. I'm going at 32 years. So I've kind of forgotten those conversations my wife and I had in the 90s. So the part that I overlooked was, if I was a single person, he also had elements of when he was single, when he was fishing, had all the time, it was all his time hunting and fishing and all that stuff and doing whatever he wants to do, whenever he wants to do it, and how that changed. So if I was a single person, that might be the hook that I relate to. There's still something else that we know about him. Let me ask the question this way, and I'm going to ask it. I'm not judging in any sense, but for 2 years I worked in an overseas school. Is Jason possibly an appropriate candidate for an overseas school assignment? Or would we ever expect to see Jason applying for an overseas school assignment? Where does Jason work now?
See,
I'm gonna guess no on your answer. I'm not sure, but I mean, he said something about teaching at the same school he went to and the family stories and hunting and fishing. He doesn't seem to me like he's a candidate to jump and go somewhere way far off.
He is working in the same school he attended. Yeah. In my mind, again, it's just how I interpret the story. There's not a right way and a wrong way of interpreting it, but my way of interpreting is he really values community. He really values being a part of that community and not straying too far away from the community from where he grew up. Jason, am I correct in that assessment?
You are correct.
Yeah. You see, he didn't say that directly. He didn't say, I value the community. I value working and serving the community that raised me. He didn't say that. But through the story, that's what I interpreted. See, and that's the power of stories, is because we learn so much about individuals through the stories without being hit over the head with platitudes. Thank you so much, Jason. Tiffany, let's hear your story now.
Oh man, so I feel like I didn't have one specific story. I combined about 10 years in one, but I can tell you the very first conversation I had was in Dr. Miller's office at Oak Kentucky Home Middle School when I was an EBD teacher. So that was the first conversations I had about leadership. It was several years after that that I actually started looking into those roles. And again, it was really a conversation with a person each time on where they saw my strengths and what that might look like in the roles that essentially came up. I did a lot of coaching with other teachers prior to going to central office. Then again, also coaching special education teachers as a director. That was still something that was really important to me, was staying connected to people. So I would even say for myself, you ask about, I don't remember your exact question, but I think it was something to the effect of, what did you learn about yourself?
Yes.
That piece was definitely my ability to connect with people. It doesn't matter where I am, who they are. It doesn't matter age. I definitely can connect to people. I can have a conversation just about with anyone over anything. I'm able to diffuse a lot of tense situations. And as an administrator, that's definitely a strength. So I think I'm really a people person. I like to talk and connect with people and kids.
Yeah. So Tiffany, thank you very much. That's the trap that we all want to fall into, is tell so much. And like you say, I think you said 10 years worth of stories and you kind of blended them together. Now you tipped off, so you tipped your hat to something. You said to connect with people, and there have been some tense situations. Here's my suggestion, because we're down to like 3 minutes, I think. Looking for a clock. 2 minutes. I think you've got some great potential with one of those situations where you may have been in a really tense situation, and how your ability to connect with people resolved that tension or lowered the tension. Again, narrow it down, be focused, and be very specific. And that's what makes it memorable, because we all have those tense situations with parents and colleagues sometimes. Any one of those would be great. So thank you, Tiffany. But that's how I would approach your next story. And you get people say, I got a million stories. That's great. Don't try to combine them into 500,000 stories. Keep them individual and detailed. Let's see. So the moral of the story, we already talked about this. Quick quiz. Does anybody remember what color Monty's car was from my very first story?
So rusty red. Was the light
Rusty red. Yep. Rusty assembly tray. Yeah. What brand of beer did Monty drink?
Was it Schlitz or something like that?
Schlitz. What kind of Schlitz? What size?
Oh, the tall boys.
Tall boys. Schlitz tall boys. And what lesson was Monty teaching me?
Don't answer the phone at 6 a.m.
No, well, that probably was a good lesson. Every opportunity, every interaction is an opportunity to deepen and extend the relationship. Yeah. Now I did that to prove a point. We had 50 minutes together. And that was it. But some of the elements of the story that I told you at the very beginning, before we got into any of this, was that you remembered those. You remembered those. All right. So where can you hear great stories? Go to the Moth. You may have heard on NPR, Moth Story Hour. There, talking out of school, stories that celebrate teaching, learning, and growing. Third Tuesday of every month, February to May, because I canceled last night because of the plague hitting all of us here. 7 o'clock at Apollo's Pizza. Would love to have you. And so go out and share your amazing stories, true, personal, honest stories. And here's the commercial. I'm assuming you all have your masters at least. If you're looking for an EDS or an EDD, we're the place. The EDS program, 30-hour program, all virtual, asynchronous online. You never have to see me. Beyond you don't even have to see me on Zoom because we don't do it that way. It's all asynchronous virtual. Would love to talk to you about advancing your career and your education. And if you've got other questions, I believe my contact is somewhere in there. Or it's on that last slide, but it's also in the program. Thank you so much. Thank you, Aaron, for hosting this. Thank you, Gregory, Jason, and Tiffany in particular for sharing your stories, and the others who commented on those as well. Didn't leave any time. If you have questions, I'm happy to hang around until that, but otherwise, stay warm, stay healthy. Good luck being pandemic principals.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Luck, for all of this wonderful conversation and learning today in breakout room 4. And so we are now on a break until it looks like we're in room 4. Round 4 starts at 11:10. So you got about 18 minutes to grab you a little snack and take a little break. And we know that's important. So everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.